we did a small survey among European ethics committees in order to prepare for today's meeting, and I will just briefly describe it. It has some limitations, but we still wanted to understand what European ethics committees have in practice been doing when they reviewed pediatric trials with medicines in the last year mainly. We wanted also to explore if the information from EMA is or could be useful, and this information could comprise public scientific guidelines, but it also could comprise confidential information and in particular, of course, information related to pediatrics. Then also we wanted to understand how European ethics committees in general have approached reviewing pediatric trials. So in addition to what you have done, also to understand your attitudes and the approach that you have done. So that was meant to inform today's meeting, and the web-based questionnaire that was sent out in September to November was sent to more than 800 recipients, including ethics committees and their individual members, as well as the few organizations that we were aware of. Unfortunately, we overall had a low response rate, and then we wondered how to deal with that, because it's certainly not comprehensive and representative, but nevertheless we thought this is a snapshot of the responses, and it gives us a snapshot and some brainstorming of ideas that we would find useful for this meeting. So the results came from these red dots over the world. We sent them to European committees, but of course you can open the internet link from anywhere. It nevertheless gives an idea that we have some responses from all over Europe, and I would like to say thank you to all of those who are here today and contributed to this survey. One of the first questions was to understand how many opinions are being issued on trials overall per year, and the median was 50 opinions per year. Regarding pediatric trials, we saw that ethics committees both had very small numbers, such as 1 to 4 pediatric trials, but there were also a number of ethics committees who said they would issue opinions on 25 to 50 pediatric trials per year, just indicating that there's quite some high variability, and as we heard, maybe also reflecting the different organizations of the ethics committees in the member states. We had some questions that we selected also to present here today, such as during that review, when you involve external experts, what is the usefulness, and how do ethics committees think that pediatric experts, when being consulted on certain questions, could help? And we were surprised to see a little bit that there were mixed responses on the external experts, but also we asked, of course, is there any impact of the fact that pediatric trials required by the PDCO lead ethics committees maybe to already look at this and with the notion that a federal opinion may be possible, because there already has been some discussion of the pediatric trials. And here again, I just put it here to really say that there were split opinions. Some said yes, in principle, it could impact towards a federal opinion if there was already understanding that the pediatric trial was required by the PDCO. Obviously, we want to bring this here to your attention just to say that we are conscious of that, and that we are aware that the European system has the explicit and different layers of scrutinizing pediatric trials. So we need to be very much aware, and everybody needs to know who does what and what are the responsibilities, so that there are clear understandings of the complementary actions being taken to protect the pediatric participants. Now, looking into the details, how particular elements of pediatric trials have been assessed, obviously we were interested in how the assent is being actually looked at and being required from ethics committees to be implemented as part of the continuous consent and assent process in the protocols. And we see here that there were more or less equal frequencies among about the 30 respondents who answered on that point. A third said that 6 to 8 years will be the age from which on systematically assent was required in the protocols that they had reviewed, but there were others who said this is about 12 years, and some were, a few were mentioning 16 years, which, as we discussed yesterday, is of course reflecting an adult age. at which many are assumed to be already competent taking medical care decisions for their own. So here this also points out that systematic differences seem to be occurring. We discussed yesterday that there is a concept of having data in less vulnerable persons first, adults or older children, and often there's an approach of age staggering, whereby first older cohorts of persons or even children are being recruited and then analyzed for the safety data, and then it is reviewed and considered whether younger children can safely be exposed. We asked whether this is required by ethics committees, and indeed more ethics committees considered this necessary than not necessary. And a number of ethics committees said they have actively required this age staggering to be added to the protocol when it was not there in the first place. We had some complex questions, I believe, on how the risk assessment is being done, and we wanted to understand how this complex topic and how the complex assessment is practically carried out. So we have some high-level information here, which is obvious that ethics committees consider all relevant existing study data, but they also have indicated that they evaluate the risks associated with uncertainties around pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. So it's looking at what you know, but also evaluating the risk of the unknown. However, we are aware that no formal approach for weighing the risks has been implemented, although some have a formalism by which they say for each risk there should be a mitigation measure or a measure to control the risk. And hope this will be addressed again in today's working groups to some extent. Now, looking at the usefulness of guidelines, we asked how much they were useful to ethics committees as well as to clinical researchers to write better protocols. And remarkably, the most important point would be to harmonize and better define potentially terms and definitions such as direct benefit. That was the most frequent response. Practical aspects were then the second most frequent responses, more guidance on that. A discussion of the ethical principles was not really seen to be a major need for the existing guidelines. There was not much of a difference between guidelines useful to ethics committees and to clinical researchers. We thought there might be, but there wasn't. Now, looking at EMA potential contributions, respondent ethics committees found in their majority that they did see pediatric trial proposals which came with summary reports, but these were very few. So only 1 to 4 per year actually did have a pediatric committee summary report or this EMA decision on a PIP, which has the study synopsis and the rationale in it. When they saw the summary report, that was found to be useful, but again, many ethics committees don't know yet, and the purpose of this meeting is partly to explain this. Those who saw the summary report said that it would be important to see the following points as listed here. How does the pediatric committee review the existing data and discuss the importance of that data, and particularly the risk at the time, looking into the future for the time of the trial. The PCO should also probably discuss systematically placebo, the statistical plan, and certainly there should be a mentioning of blood sampling and so on. So these points also were taken by us as a suggestion, as a brainstorming on really what we have to focus on and be conscious about what is an expectation for a PDCO summary report. We wanted to see if there were disagreements of ethics committees with elements of PIP trials, so those required by the pediatric committee. And it seems that some disagreement has occurred occasionally, and that concerned mostly the evaluation of anticipated benefits and risk, to some extent the inclusion-exclusion criteria and the placebo use. Some disagreement was mentioned by ethics committees to relate to the patient information sheet, which, however, is not really specified in the PIP, but is then when the study synopsis of the PIP is being translated into a full protocol. So we don't know actually about the patient information sheet at the time of PDCO discussion. Now, looking forward, there was the question on how could ethics committees and the EMA, including the PDCO, bilaterally interact. The ethics committee said they would find it useful if information was sent to them on new guidelines on pediatric investigation plans, and also if we would inform them on pediatric experts workshops and their outcome. And that is, of course, a suggestion we are very happy because that can be readily taken up and implemented. There was not a big number who suggested that actually the contents of PIPs should also be discussed. So the need to share and to discuss PIP contents was not a priority seen by the responding ethics committees for this bilateral interaction. On their hand, the respondent ethics committees said they would be able also to share with the pediatric committee, such as to inform the PDCO when there are cases of disagreement, but also to request more information. And again, thank you very much for these responses. These are helpful in flagging what can be done in the future. A final question I'm going to present this morning was related to our recently launched clinical trial register, which makes public at this time all the protocols of ongoing clinical trials in the European Union and also those pediatric trials in PIPs that are being conducted outside the European Union. We were asking what information is it that the European ethics committees are particularly looking for. And as you can see here, this is related to the disease. What are the existing results? We will publish the results probably from the mid to end of next year on. So our clinical trial register will include then also results, not only protocols. Other medicines are being also of interest when they belong to the class of medicine. So we understand that the clinical trial register really could be useful, and we have to make sure that this really meets the needs of all the stakeholders here. So just to conclude and finish up here, we fully appreciate that this was definitely not a representative survey, but if we just have a look for what it was used for, we believe that it flagged the potential of PIP documents for the ethics committees. So we recognize this potential of having an explicit discussion of the rationale to make clear how the PDCO had discussed it and then also lay this down in the document. We will also be able to use it to make understandable the discussion of the trial methodology. And we need to think about how access and sharing of documents can be achieved if necessary. Of course, one obvious possibility is that sponsors make their summary report available to ethics committees. So for us, this suggests that there are topics on which we could have a future exchange, both on general and specific matters. And also, given the other answers, where we have seen that there are systematic differences with good reasoning behind it, to highlight that there is a need really to have European networking of ethics committees on pediatric matters. And one of the main tasks of the agency is to support such networking and to support communication and to facilitate the collaboration of all European stakeholders involved in such parties. And we'll be happy to take on that job and hopefully define later this morning how we could all do this. So thank you very much to the participants and thank you for listening this morning.
Thank you, Dr. Herold. We have time for one or two questions. Any questions to Dr. Herold? I have one on your second to last slide before the conclusion slide. I think the last point was, what are the decisions of competent authorities, Ander? What was meant by that? They want to know yes, no, or they want to know the rationale?
Right, thank you. So this is an interesting point. I don't know whether they wanted the rationale, but just having the decision would already be very helpful. So that is part of the European Clinical Trial Registry to document when a clinical trial was not approved. So when there is a negative ethics vote, and then this is going to be made public with the reasons. That is already foreseen. It's part of the guidance. For the reasons, there has been a categorization. I believe it's about 12 reasons which has been agreed by ethics committees in Europe and then are expected to be used for saying why it hasn't received a favorable opinion. The purpose, of course, being to avoid that similar designs, which will be made public along with it, would then be proposed again and would as was mentioned, lead to a shopping or eventually to a study that is being conducted where it has been found not to be acceptable in other places.
Thank you. Yes?
A question stimulated by this same slide. The first, I guess my question is to those that are on ethics committees. The first 3 bullet points there ought to be addressed in what we call the investigator's brochure. In other words, how has that medicine been tested in other diseases, et cetera. So I'm just curious, by the fact that those were 3 points of information that ethics committees wanted, are they not seeing something like what is an investigator's brochure in the U.S., which would include all that information?
Dr. Herold, do you have an answer to that question, or shall I take some more?
Yeah, maybe the ethics committee want to respond themselves. They see the investigator's brochure. What I understand is that you do some additional research. You make sure you look around what is being done.
Mm-hmm. There's some people on the list already, Inez, and then Petra. Other people who want that I didn't see? Okay, so Petra. Inez, sorry.
Thank you. I was wondering what information you have, or if you have any information on other research than with medicine, because I'm very intrigued by the comparison in how people look at risks and benefits. Of course, your task is the medicine thing, but did they provide you with any information on other kinds of trials, surgical procedures?
No, we didn't ask for that, but I think one of the benefits of having a future exchange would be to have this cross-fertilization, to learn from other types of research that is not only for a pharmaceutical medicine. You know that the clinical trial definition has this intervention there, but again, this exchange should probably benefit. I'm not sure if in the Imprima, do you have other types of medicine? The Imprima is targeted towards looking into trials with medicines, but I guess these are the same researchers who also do maybe look into other interventions.
Yeah, it is really to foster clinical trials and improve the use of medicines, but you're quite right in that the researchers there will be doing studies with non-investigational products. Yeah.
We won't be blind on that eye, hopefully.
Petra.
Yeah. Although not representative, I think this is very interesting, the results which you got from the survey. And what is very good, I think, are the detailed questions or the detailed information which would help ethics committees to even better evaluate, because that was on one slide. I want to comment 2 little things. You were surprised that they don't call for pediatric experts for every trial. Well, that is because they have pediatricians in the committee. We, for example, we have a chair who is a pediatrician and 3 substitutes. And when it's difficult, we all ask them. But the second thing is about assent. There is a confusion. Assent can be obtained also by somebody who cannot write and read. So assent you should try to get by every child. And not only when it's 7, also when it's younger. But what the committees maybe meant when they answered was that as soon as somebody can read and write a little bit, provide him not only with oral information, but also with written information. That's the idea.
Thank you. Yes?
I would like to comment on this investigator's brochure. As in principle, you are correct, but there are a few problems. I think in general, ongoing trials are not included in the IB. I may be wrong, but I have read many ones, and I rarely found information about ongoing trials. The second issue is more serious, is that the IB comparatively often is old. That means 6-12 months. And when we from an ethics committee then ask, we want to have an update or a new one, we occasionally and more than once get the answer, that will only be done in another 6 months or so. And then we have also the legal issue with the timelines. So if we do not immediately say when we get the submission that the submission is not complete, then we have to do the things within the 30 or 60 days time limit. So there are problems, but the major points are ongoing trials are not included, and the IB is quite often not really up to date.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes?
Yeah, AJ Allen from US and also from Eli Lilly. Regarding that last point on the IB, I don't know, I can't speak for other companies, but I know that as a rule, what we're doing when we update the IB, we update it when there's significant new information, a new trial or whatever, but at least once a year. So when you get a response from a company that it isn't anticipated to be updated for 6 months or that, it may just be because they're not looking at their process and what's coming through the pipeline as far as new data. There is not new data that's going to be there until 6 months from now. The other thing that I would just mention is there is a new safety assessment that's being rolled out as we speak. I know at least in the U.S. and I assume in Europe as well, which is the Developmental Safety Update Report, or DSUR, which the executive summary of that is supposed to be another piece that could be provided to ethics committees or IRBs, and that is described in the ICH, I think it's E2F guidance.
All right, unless there's other comments, I think we'll move into our subgroups. I would just like to remind all those who are reporting back at 11 o'clock to be short, synthesized, and succinct so that we have time for discussion on your reports as well in that whole block from 11 to 12:30. So I'm going to turn the chair over to Dr. Herold to give us some instructions on our subgroups. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and also thank you for having signed up to subgroups. The first subgroup will be moderated by Dr. Hasford, and will go to the second floor. And I just put here on the screen, the members, participants who have signed up for this subgroup. I will accompany you to the second floor, and we will convene in the next minutes outside. So please check if your name is still on there. The second subgroup on trial with neonates will be joined by my colleague, Dr. Ralf Bucks. Could you wave a hand? Dr. Bucks will take you to the first floor, where you then will be in the meeting room 1B. The third subgroup will be moderated by Dr. de Groot, and please see the names who have signed up for this group. And I will accompany as well you to the second floor, and the last subgroup will be moderated by Dr. Mahle, and will then go also to the second floor. Please have a look at the names here. So we tried to have topics that are of interest, being aware that we need to split out about 85 participants into the subgroups. Let me just briefly show you that in the agenda, the topics of subgroup 1 and 4 are somewhat similar. So subgroup 1 is to address approaches to the assessment of risk before the pediatric trial. So that really was meant to focus on the existing data, maybe on the class of medicines, on the formal approaches that we just discussed briefly in the survey as well. Whereas the subgroup 4 was to focus on the benefit and risk harms evaluation. So it has a slightly different notion, but both is very important. And I think the subgroup 4 will maybe work a little bit on the balancing and on how incoming data will inform any changes of that evaluation. We would like to ask every subgroup to focus, please, on 2 matters. The first focus, as it's here, is to maybe look at the bullet points, how in pediatric investigation plans could the EMA and the PDCO help the EC ethics committees? So which would be the information you would need to assist you in making these evaluations, and also on the other so the second point would be, reversely, how could ethics committees potentially help the EMA and the pediatric committee to take account of important points, not to overlook very important discussion matters. The third point is, how could children be involved in this overall process? Now that is a point that is there in the agenda since long, and it feeds into various other projects where we are trying to define the role and possibilities for participation of children. So we would just make sure that this is being part of the considerations. I'm not sure if we can expect many responses on that point yet, because we still have to give it an overall framework, but if you have some suggestions, please help. For all these points, we would be happy to have both maybe some concrete ideas for the very next weeks and months to go, but then more importantly, as our chair said, we need to look into the future. So how can we define our future interactions on these points? So if you just have both this concrete view and the strategic view in your outcome, that would be really helpful.